Mi nombre es Rodrigo Rosensberg y lamentablemente si usted está en este momento oyendo y viendo este mensaje es porque fui asesinado por el señor presidente Alvaro Colom.
A posthumous video almost literally delivered from the grave. In it, a handsome and successful Guatemalan lawyer named Rodrigo Rosensberg describes why he has been killed and who did it. He points the finger at none other than Guatemala's president, Alvaro Colom, the First Lady, as well as the president's private secretary and a top campaign fundraiser. The 18-minute video immediately became a YouTube hit, viewed all around the world. It set off a political firestorm in Guatemala, putting the Colom government under a harsh glare. For many Guatemalans, the Rosenberg tape tore the lid off a Pandora's box of mafia-style politics and organized crime eating away at the institutions of state. A brilliant lawyer and father of four, Rosenberg held master's degrees from both Cambridge and Harvard, where he studied comparative law.
En sus casos, las personas que trabajaban mucho con él me decían, mira, él no era un confrontativo, no era un abogado que encontraba, siempre buscaba más vale un mal arreglo que un buen juicio.
If Rosenberg feared for his life, he showed little sign of it on the morning of Sunday, May 10th, when he left his apartment in an upscale neighborhood of Guatemala City for a bike ride. A block later, a car blocked his path, and an assassin leapt out and expertly fired 3 bullets into Rosenberg's face. In the video, Rosenberg blamed his death on a palace power struggle for control over money laundering at the nation's rural development bank, Ban Rural, which is part state-owned. A key spot on the bank's board had been offered to one of Rosenberg's clients, Khalil Musa, a respected Lebanese-born businessman. In April, Musa and his daughter Marjorie were gunned down on their way to lunch. Rosenberg blamed their deaths on the Coloms, as well as the president's private secretary, Gustavo Alejos, and a wealthy businessman, Gregorio Valdes, who was one of Colom's top campaign supporters. In the video, Rosenberg suggests that the Coloms used Musa's reputation for honesty to intimidate Ban Rural into illegally diverting funds to their own special projects. He adds that in reality, they had no plans to appoint Musa to the bank and had him killed when his usefulness ran out. On the tape, Rosenberg provided little evidence, though he mentioned he had documents to back him up.
Yo tengo conocimiento directo, tengo los documentos que demuestran cómo el cobarde y asesino de Gustavo Alejos.
Rosenberg recorded the video 3 days before his death after confiding with a friend.
Rodrigo vino aquí y me dijo, mira, he tenido seguimientos, entro a la casa y prendiendo la luz, inmediatamente recibo una llamada telefónica, no me dicen nada, sino que sencillamente cuelgan. Cada vez que salgo, yo sé que me están siguiendo.
It was Mendizábal who distributed copies of Rosenberg's testimony at the burial. A 62-year-old security expert specializing in negotiating kidnappings, Mendizábal is a former director of Guatemala's immigration service. The tape was recorded by Mario David Garcia, a conservative lawyer, academic, and host of a popular afternoon radio show.
Cuando en esta misma sala grabamos el video más o menos de 6 menos 10 a 6 y 8 y 10. A mí sí me sorprendió esa tarde de jueves 7 de mayo, cuando Rodrigo se para frente a la cámara, sin papel, sin leer, y empieza a hablar. Porque tenía un conocimiento, yo diría, estaba saturado del conocimiento de este caso. Por eso es que es inquietante y por eso también es que siento que si uno, como yo mismo, tenía dudas de la probable culpabilidad o inocencia de los señalados por Rodrigo, cada vez me he ido convenciendo más de la culpabilidad porque no han querido discutir el tema de fondo, sino han estado insistiendo en cuestiones periféricas.
The Colom government contends the Rosenberg tape is part of a right-wing conspiracy by the country's business elite to sabotage the president's economic reforms. Officials have highlighted Mendizábal's ties to El Salvador's right-wing Arena Party, as well as comments Garcia made on the radio back in 1988 to defend a failed military coup. The government also points out that Rosenberg failed to mention on the tape that he had been carrying on a secret affair with Marjorie Musa. Rosenberg's family and friends say that while he was distraught about the death of his lover, his principal motive was to denounce the corruption he had uncovered involving Ban Rural and the Coloms.
Es que aquí no hay una conspiración como salen a decir el gobierno. No es un levantamiento contra el gobierno, es un levantamiento contra la impunidad.
Ban Rural has long been a source of corruption rumors involving abuse of public funds. Part state-owned, the bank handles more than 50% of the federal budget, as well as half of the remittances from overseas worth $2 billion annually. Some are now calling for a forensic audit of the bank.
Y si uno busca cuál es la definición de una auditoría forense, pues es una auditoría que involucra no solo el tema financiero, sino que involucra el tema legal y es específica para poder determinar actos de corrupción tanto del lado del sector público como del sector privado.
Rosenberg described the bank as a den of thieves, with everyone competing to launder their illegal activities through its accounts, including the First Lady.
Que todos sabemos que ahí se financian todos los proyectos de la esposa del presidente que son fantasmas para su campaña política, que todos sabemos que ella está haciendo. Que ahí se financia a todos los empresas fantasmas donde se lava todo el dinero, al cual Gustavo Alejos y Gregorio Valdes llevan.
In the video, Rosenberg repeatedly mentioned drug money laundering as being a factor in his death. US officials estimate that 70% of the illegal drugs that enter the United States now pass through Guatemala. Experts say Mexican cartels began moving part of their operations to Guatemala about 3 years ago. Deposits in the country's banking system have grown 20% annually over the last 3 years, despite the global economic crisis, a sign that organized crime is using local banks to launder money. Colom's social welfare program, called Social Cohesion, run by the First Lady, has caused deep unease among the country's right-wing business class. A strong-willed woman from the lawless Petén region of northern Guatemala, Mrs. Colom is known in the presidential palace as the bulldozer. Critics say the First Lady's program of food packages and cash handouts for the poor lacks transparency and is designed to build her political base in the countryside for a run at the presidency in 2011. In the video, Rosenberg repeatedly mentioned 2 men close to the president. Gustavo Alejos is a wealthy businessman and the president's private secretary. The other man, Gregorio Valdes, owns a plane and helicopter business and provided transportation logistics for Colom's 2007 election campaign. In the video, Rosenberg accused Valdes of being a drug trafficker. Valdes has never been charged with any drug-related crime. However, in 1994, a former DEA agent, Celerino Castillo, wrote a book in which he said Valdes provided a hangar and airplane services to the DEA in Guatemala City. But Castillo said the DEA turned a blind eye to Valdes's own trafficking activities.
Lo que hay es toda una cultura de impunidad de esa élite que ha mantenido el poder.
For 2 Sundays in a row, thousands of mostly middle-class Guatemalans have marched to demand justice in the case and calling for Colom to resign.
Nuestro clamor es por justicia, nuestro clamor es por paz, nuestro clamor es por seguridad y por unidad.
Today, a black bow adorns the facade of Rosenberg's condo building. Buckets of flowers and a wooden and marble cross stand by the roadside where he was killed. In an effort to reassure a skeptical public, the Colom government invited the FBI to assist in the Rosenberg case. A special United Nations-run investigative unit, the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala, headed by a Spanish prosecutor, is also investigating the case jointly with a Guatemalan federal prosecutor. So far, there is little word about what direction the investigation is headed. Everyone has their theory. Rosenberg's solid reputation make him an unlikely person to be involved in a right-wing plot. At the same time, it's hard to believe the Colom government could have committed such a blatant crime. Most people suspect that the answer to this whodunit most likely lies buried in the competing interests for control of Ban Rural.
Guatemaltecos, estamos a tiempo. Por favor, estamos a tiempo. Buenas tardes.